I'm really Stan Chapman. Stan Chapman really wanted to be here today. I don't know if you remember that he was he did the opening for us last year, and he told me he really wanted to come back, but unfortunately the Mercedes plant is about to go into a one-week shutdown, and things are kind of crazy at the plant. So he's on, in the plant, making sure that everything is perfect so that we can shut down and come back in another week. But thank you for allowing Mercedes-Benz to be a part of this event. We value the partnership with the Birmingham Business Alliance, and it's good to see so many friends and colleagues in the audience today. I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing our speaker for today's luncheon, and you have his bio, so I'm not going to go into all of it. I'm very pleased that they've given me an enlarged copy so that I can read it a little bit better, but you have the small version. I'll hit some of the keynotes, and then we're actually going to hear from him, which is the main point here today. We're very fortunate to have one of Birmingham's beloved and native sons, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski, as our guest speaker. Dr. Hrabowski is the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and a nationally recognized educator, author, advocate, philanthropist, innovator, and leader. Throughout his work, he has advocated and led many initiatives to advance education for African American children. He was named one of America's best leaders by U.S. News & World Report, and one of America's 10 best college presidents, and one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Most recently, he was appointed by President Barack Obama to chair the newly created President's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. Again, this native son is a child leader of the civil rights movement and prominently featured in Spike Lee's 1997 documentary, 4 Little Girls. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Freeman Hrabowski.
Thank you so much. That was most appropriate. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. I am always thrilled when somebody gives a brief introduction, because when somebody gives a long introduction, all it does is to let you know how old you become. It goes on, and you get more and more depressed before you even begin to speak. It is great to be home, Mr. Mayor. I am honored to be among friends, and to my pastor and to all of you here. Let me start by saying that when Dr. French told that story about my looking in the mirror, I couldn't help but remember that I had been in a program at Tuskegee that summer. And it was a math and science program sponsored by the National Science Foundation. And a professor came in, and all these little black kids from the North were there, and they just knew they were smarter than we were. And they had had a stronger background, no doubt about that. But they came in, and it was a statistics course. And the professor came in and put a problem on the board, and he looked at us and he said, "Can anybody solve it?" And we all thought we were the best and brightest, and nobody could solve it. And he said, "See me when you can." And he walked out. And the kids got really upset because they were not accustomed not to being able to solve a problem. And of course, if they could not solve a problem, the teacher was supposed to help. And they were arguing about how terrible this professor was. And I said, "Who is that man?" And they said his name, Dr. whatever. And I thought he was Superman, literally, because he came in and he explained the problem just well enough to excite us about the possibilities. And then he left, and I said, "Wait a minute, this man is not being a bad teacher. This man is telling us that we are smart enough to figure it out. He's saying he doesn't have to tell us how to solve it." Now, I was a little younger than my classmates there, and they looked at me, and the northern kids immediately said, "Well, that's not the way we do it in the North. This must be the way you do it in the South." And I said, "No, but people respect the children in the South." And everybody, the little Southerners in the room, Yvette smiling, others, was very interesting. All of a sudden, felt very good about that. And I remember that story because when they told me he had a PhD, they said his name is Doctor. I said this. I said, "He's not a physician." They said, "No, he's a PhD." I said, "What's a PhD?" And they said, "It's the highest degree you can get." I said, "That's what I'm going to get." So I was a fat little kid loving to eat and do math. That's all I wanted to do. I was doing math and eating all the time. My friend Gay is here, Ms. Glover's here, and I was just eating, and they would feed me that good pie and the rolls and everything. I'd be eating and doing math all the time. And the fatter I got, the smarter I was getting, all right? And so I would look in the mirror every day, and I would say, starting at age 13, "Good morning, Dr. Hrabowski. Good morning." And what is amazing is it became clear to me that if we can help children to see who they want to become, if we can get them to want to be smart, kids of all races, if we can get them to want to be honorable people, they can do anything. If we expect the most from them, and this is what Birmingham did for me. When I think of Birmingham, I think of it as a village in the most impressive sense of that word, because whether it was our church, our community, our neighbors, everybody was our parent. And what was significant was that in the schools, at my public schools in Birmingham, Shields Elementary and Elman High School, every teacher showed that belief in those children. And I remember how it helped to shape my philosophy. And so the message that I give people all over the country and beyond is that the way we think about ourselves, the language that we use, the way we interact with each other, the values that we hold will be so important. We become like that which we love. I come from a state that has made the decision in many ways to show its belief in education. And so our governor, our mayor, Stephanie Rawlings, our governor O'Malley, the legislature, even over the past rough 5 years, said we will protect education at all costs. Give the state of Maryland a hand for protecting education. Many of the business leaders here in Birmingham and others came to my campus, and they were proud of me as a native of Birmingham, and we talked about things. And what I want to do today is to talk about a bit of my experience in Birmingham and how it propelled me on to other things, but more importantly, about my sense of what we must do in education for our children and what we in communities must do as we think about building the economies in different regions of this country. For the Maryland area, the advantage we know we have is that we have many government agencies. We've got all of the institutes of NIH. But one. We've got NASA Goddard. We've got NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology. And so people know that if we want those agencies to feel good about being in that corridor, and if we want to figure out ways of taking advantage, we have to keep pumping money into supporting children of all types. And it is making a big difference. We lead the country in the percentage of African Americans who are passing all AP exams in the nation. Big hand for that. It's a big deal. Big deal. Advanced placement exams. Maryland and Alabama in many ways have many things. You know, I always say when I'm talking that I love to tell stories, and I said that didn't come from Maryland. I said Maryland is what I call the Upper South. One day we are like people in Philadelphia, the next day we're like people in Richmond. Depends on the issue. It's been that way since the Civil War, all right? But I said I grew up in the Deep South, and I'm very proud of that. And everybody I know who grew up in Birmingham has that same sense. I mean, whether it is Kathy Freeland, who grew up here and went to UAB and is probably the second richest black woman in the state of Maryland, has started a company, sold it for millions and millions of dollars, contributed, gave my campus money and other places money, works with the business school here at UAB, and amazingly is what we call a serial entrepreneur. She's already gotten another company. She put $12 million into a second company. She's going to build it up, she said, to $100 million in revenues, sell it again. You know, and she's an expert in technology. And for the women in the room, she tells the story that when she came from UAB and she was working for a contractor, and she's the only little minority there, and she learned to work well, and they really respected her. They respected her so much and believed in her that every time somebody came in, usually a guy, she had to train that guy. And finally, she said, I'm tired of training the guy. And what she did was she took her expertise with $3,000 and literally started a company and was able to sell it for millions, tens of millions of dollars. Give Kathy Freeland a hand for what she was able to do. And if you ask her what made the difference, she says that ability to think well, to have confidence in oneself, to learn how to deal with people of all races, to have the belief that if I try hard and I push and never give up, all kinds of things are possible. You know, when I grew up in Birmingham, it's so interesting that in that Titusville community, we had everybody from our doctor, Dr. Plump, that everybody went to and loved, you know. We had one or two wonderful lawyers. We had my dentist, Dr. Short. We had everybody we needed. And then in the business community, you know, it's amazing. I called Pat Bowman Billups because her father was amazing. He had the grocery store that everybody used. And what was significant about that grocery store was it wasn't just that they were responsive, but quite frankly, a whole lot of times people didn't have all the money they needed. And he had that way of giving you that charge and letting your family continue to eat, and you built a relationship with the family. You know, and so when my daddy died, he just started helping my mama with all of that, and it was amazing. He'd bring the groceries to the house. She'd call it in, you know, and then he began to multitask. Another big need had to do with termites. Who would think? Termites, right? So starting a business to exterminate termites. This same family, and they give the Bowman family a hand for being excellent examples. And Pat is here today. I'm very proud of that. But, you know, you go down the line with and the people who are here from the Titusville area, you know, we had the people over the TV shop, Mr. Gales and the TV people, who was coming to everybody's house. It was amazing. And you could go in every kind of business, there was someone there. And the key is this, that we saw people doing that work, just as we, of course, saw, everybody knows the biggest is always going to be the funeral home because everybody's got to die, right? We know that. And I had uncles at funeral homes in different places, and they really wanted me to get into that business. So, but insurance, you name the business, and this is for any American community, whether the people are white, black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever you have. But the key is this, that even today, when looking at the big picture, you know, everybody wants to say, well, Chicago, New York, amazingly, down, out of LA, there are cities where you've got about 10% of the black businesses, and you're talking about billions of dollars, but I'm a mathematician. I want to know the universe. What's the universe of money? What are we talking about? We talk about receipts. Do you know that although everybody talks about that minority businesses are growing faster than anybody else, what they don't tell you to do is to go back to your basic mathematics. If you've got a small base, doesn't take much to have a big increase in the rate. You get my point? You know, if let me put it to you this way. If I've got $1 and somebody gives me 20 cents, I've had a 20% increase. You see what I'm saying? But if I got $1,000 and somebody gives me 20 cents, it doesn't even count. So, you know, and what happens is I've heard people using the most recent statistics, oh, minority business is growing fast. I'm like, yeah, because the base is so small. Let me tell you how small the base is. Talking about billions and billions up to about $1 trillion. Let me tell you what this means. The receipts. When you put all you're talking about black businesses, under 1% of that money to black businesses, under 1%. And one of the findings of the most recent study is that even black consumers don't take advantage and use and support African-American business. Give me a hand for the idea of consumers of all types using those businesses. It's very important. So what am I saying? I'm saying that in communities that are going to make a difference, the way I know you want to do here in Birmingham. You've already shown UAB is a national model now when thinking about healthcare. And I'm at NIH all the time, and you get big grants here. I mean, people would put you in the same category of research as an Emory, for example. It's a big deal that a public institution is doing so well. You're bringing in talent. Some of my very best students, black and white, who've gone to my campus and gone to Hopkins and to Harvard, are now here on the faculty at UAB. The idea of attracting brain power is the number one theme for any part of the country or the world that wants to get ahead. Let me ask you a question. How many people in this room are between the ages of 35 and 70? Let me see your hands. I got good news and bad news. Which one you want first? Let me give you the bad news first. Bad news is you're getting old. Get over it. It's all right. I can say that. My friends are now 60 plus, right? But the good news is you are the most educated people in the world, with exception, if you have a college degree, with the exception of one country, and that's Norway. Other than that, we are the best educated people in the world. But now, watch this. How many of you in the room are between 25 and 34? Let me see your hands. Raise your hands. All right? Yeah, they raise them real proud, saying, yeah, I'm still young. Yeah, I got that. I see the looks on your faces. But check this out. You want the good news or the bad news first? Bad news is you're not as smart as we are. Good news is, quite frankly, we are jealous as hell because we wish we were your age, all right? I'd be a little unsmart if I could be a little younger right now. Wait a minute. What is my point? That in terms of competition, I'm working with the White House and others on this issue of increasing the number of kids who can make it in school and with the different national agencies. And the fact is that we are not making the same progress as other countries. And that's not just for kids of color, that's for white boys, are not going to college at the same rate. So what we talk about in terms of what we need to do for minority children is what we need to do for children in general. It is to help them to aspire to want to be smart. Right. You know, every little boy wants to be basketball or football. That's all right, but most are not going to be pro. And here's the part that people don't know. All those wonderful basketball players and football players, after they leave, within a few years, so large percentages are bankrupt. because they never learned the basic thinking skills and the kind of centering to make sure the money didn't get the best of them and that people wouldn't use them, and financial literacy. Some of the banks work on this, when you talk about what's happening in our country, so many families don't know how to analyze, just at the financial literacy level, revenues and expenditures for the cost of a university. I was on a radio program yesterday, and the guy said, well, I don't know what to do. We're sending our two sons, they're twins, and it's costing $50,000 a year, and we're short about $35,000 per child, and we work, but we don't even make $100,000 together. And I'm thinking to myself, now, why would they be going to an institution that expensive when they don't have the money? When you can get a great education from a public institution. But somehow they're thinking that's what they have to do. We have to teach families to look at what they want to spend. We have to look at how much we want to save. We have to look at what everything's going to cost and balancing it. And so a part of this notion of education, about reading skills and thinking skills, has to do with teaching people how to think about money and financial literacy and saving. I'll never forget, the role model for anybody black in Birmingham had to be that giant, A.G. Gaston. There's no doubt. Give that man a hand for what he did as a vision. It's just a wonderful story. To believe that a black man could be a millionaire. You see what I'm saying? When $1 million really was a lot of money. To think that and to see him with all from the banking and insurance and the funeral home and all of that, the idea that and the question is, how do we have more kids wanting to be like that? Wanting to do that. So my vision for all these years has been to focus on my own discipline of math and science. I said that under 1% of the receipts to black businesses. Well, I'm working with the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, all these places. If you look at, you talk about the sickest people in the world, they're going to look to the NIH because that's where you get the grants for the incurable kinds of diseases. It's the best scientists anywhere, and much of the funds you've got here at UAB, millions and millions from NIH. What percent of the scientists at NIH do you think are black? It is under 1%. And yet 25% of the people walking around there are black. They're the technicians. They are the secretaries, But in terms of scientists, it's because we only have about 2% of the PhDs in science and engineering in this country going to blacks. We only have about 2% to Hispanics. And yet, if you saw the statistics as of this past 2012, 50% of the babies born in America were of color. So the country is changing dramatically. I spent a lot of time in Japan and Germany 25 years ago. Every 6 months, I was working on competitiveness in education. There was somebody in healthcare, somebody on the economy, somebody on intelligence and defense. And it took the Japanese years to ask us what they really wanted to know. And they finally, I'm the only black in the group. You got 5 Germans, 5 Japanese, 5 Americans. And they said the Japanese took them several years after a lot of sake, to tell us what they really wanted to ask. So we all there and a lot of sake, and everybody's feeling like brothers and sisters. And they said, but there's one big problem America has. And they said this: you are, in many ways, the greatest civilization humankind has ever seen. You are the most diverse, racially and ethnically, that humankind. The Germans have always been quite homogenous, the Japanese. They said, but don't you think your diversity will be your downfall? And my response, because everybody, of course, looked right at me, right? And so I said through the socket, why are y'all looking at me? What's up with that? Now, we may talk about our country, but we don't want anybody else talking about our country. So you can believe I got all up on my house. I said, y'all got your problems too, both of y'all, the Germans, and the Japanese. I said, and it's that blandness sometimes. If you got everybody who's the same, you're not coming up with a lot of creativity. If you think about the creativity in this country, whether it's in music or in the arts or in the humanities, it has been the idea that we have seen people from so many different kinds of cultures coming together and struggling with this experiment of figuring out how do we work together as a collaborative group. It was in 1963, a month ago, that I was sitting in that jail, having marched in that children's march, and I kept trying to think, what will the future hold? It never could have occurred to me that one day I would be president of a university with 150 countries. It never could have occurred to me at all. I could not have imagined the predominantly white universities of all types in this state having lots of kids of all races there, having this city becoming as diverse as it is, having this kind of event, because anybody who's my age knows in 1963, you would never have seen an audience looking like this. I am so proud to be a part of this Baltimore experiment. You know, those of us who live in other places take great pride in the education we've gotten here. Mary Bush is a name I keep bringing up today, who's meeting with the mayor. Mary, it turns out Mary and I are now both on the board of T. Rowe Price. Now, this is a board with under 10 people at one of the finest investment houses in the country, in the world, managing billions of dollars. Who would have thought? She's the former #2 person at the International Monetary Fund, comes out of Ullman High School, comes from Center Street Elementary School, went on to Fisk and then Phi Beta Kappa, University of Chicago, MBA, but was the #2 person in the International Monetary Fund. Give Mary Bush a hand. She is an amazing. And the point I'm making is this city has and will continue to produce a lot of smart people, many of whom are right here in this room and others. The challenge that we face is to help children and families and others to see the possibilities of what the world can be. My campus now has, I said it at the earlier session, my campus, when the business community from here came, we had about 35 companies. We had broken ground. These are companies started by our faculty and by Hopkins faculty and by some of my students. We now have 110 companies on campus and 20% minority, with at least about 15 owned by African Americans. Give my campus a hand for that. It's a big deal. And the emphasis on bioengineering and IT and cybersecurity, and this is what I want all of you to think about when you think about STEM, because if you want to know how to build the economy, first of all, it is important that the arts and humanities and social sciences continue to be elevated. I'm coming back here to speak for the National Endowment for the Humanities because in this time of science and tech, it is more important than ever that we understand what it is that makes us human. It is so important. You know, Kurzweil, an MIT inventor, says that by the year 2019, we will have these automated personalities all around us. They'll be our personal assistants. They'll be waiting on us. They'll be helping us in classrooms. They will even be our lovers. Now, the advantage black people have is we don't turn red when we get embarrassed. I'm just looking at the red faces in the room. I said this, and I know this is a wonderful conservative group, but let me just say, I said that, this is not me, this is Kurzweil, one of the greatest futurists the world has ever known, that literally they'll be called automated personalities because you would offend their sensibilities if you call them a robot. Did you get that? Now, all of you have these 20th century minds, so it sounds so strange. I said this same thing to a group of brilliant and very, very wealthy women in Washington, D.C., and a woman got up and she said, "Excuse me, where can I get one of those today, please?" So it's all perspective. The world is changing dramatically. And I am telling you that STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, if you don't know it, the gross domestic product, how we really measure how we're doing, all right, is related to STEM. Somewhere between 50 and 80% of all of what happens with GDP related to STEM. And every time there is a 1% increase in the GDP, it's 1 million jobs. And so any area of the country that's going to see more jobs and more places wanting to bring jobs, whether for African Americans or others, must emphasize strong STEM. And to solve math problems, to solve chemistry problems, to solve physics problems, engineering problems, one first has to know how to read and think. And if I were to give the South one challenge, you know, when people say, oh, the SAT or the ACT, and people get upset, and people say, oh, well, minorities aren't supposed to do as well, I always shock them by saying, well, for years, I wrote the questions for the math SAT. I think I'm still black, you know. It is what it is, and standardized tests are going to be important. Who wants a doctor who can't pass the test? You're not going to let somebody cut on you, so we've got to learn how to teach, and it's all about the reading and thinking skills, and the Southern scores always are the lowest, and I'm convinced from my research, it's because we do less reading. We are good at storytelling. We are oral. This is black and white. This is for all races. If you look at the scores, they are lower. And it has to do with needing to emphasize reading and writing and thinking and getting kids to be excited about it. People learn to do what they do a lot of. The reason some little boys can play basketball is because they're always doing it. If we can get them to read and think, it can make all the difference in the world. You know, Birmingham, you are a very special community. I will never forget when I finished high school and went away, I had no idea how I would feel about my city. The older I get, the more I realize that my neighborhood, my church, my family, all my friends are family, that this is a community, people from all races, a community that really believes in strong values of hard work, of respecting authority, of being humble, of believing in our faith, of knowing that we can't do it by ourselves. I close with a story that I told at a graduation recently. Somebody was saying, oh, Freeman, you got this and you got that, and people say this. And I said, let me tell you something. They said, why do you think you've been successful? I said, I hope it's because I work hard. My family, my whole hometown gave me a sense of self. Even when people said we were second class, family and church and others said, don't you ever think that anybody else can define who you are. Give me a hand for that idea. Don't let anybody else define who you are. And they said to us, you must be twice as good because the world may not be fair, but you don't have time to be a victim. Give me a hand for the idea to tell people they don't have time to be a victim. And here is my story as I close. My grandmama, my mama's mama, was a brilliant woman with a 6th grade education, a woman who had to take that Alabama literacy test 3 times before she passed it in Wetumpka, Alabama. But when she came into that room, I'll never forget, and she said, I am now, she was 70 years old, she said with tears, I am now a first-class American citizen. Give my grandma my hand, first of all, for that voting, for voting. And so I say to young people, how dare you not vote when we've gone through all we've gone through. But she said this, boy, you're going to do well in life. She said, but I want you to stay on your knees for 2 reasons. She said, number 1, but by the grace of God. One of the mistakes you made could have whipped you out, could have just somehow, because we've all made mistakes and been given a second chance. You know what I'm talking about, everybody in this room. None of us can say we've done everything the right way all the time. So we start there with humility. But secondly, she said, as you go up that ladder, you become more and more a target, and people will work to knock you down. Any leader, Mr. Mayor, gets knocked down. She said this, though. She said, but if you on your knees, you won't fall too far. Give my grandma my hand for that. Watch your thoughts, Birmingham. They become your words. Watch your words. They become your actions. Watch your actions. They become your habits. Watch your habits, it becomes your character. I tell my students, your character has everything to do with who you are, not only when people can see you, but what will you do when your mama's not there? There's your character. So thoughts become words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Birmingham, you are a special town, and you can be even better. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Let me introduce to you now, thank you, Dr. Hrabowski. Let me introduce to you now the president of AT&T Alabama and the chair of the board of the Birmingham Business Alliance, Mr. Fred McCullum.
Thank you, Dr. French. Boy, what an act to follow. What an act to follow, Dr. Hrabowski. Thank you very much for being here and giving us really such an inspiring message. We really thank you. My name is Fred McCollum. It's my honor to be president of AT&T Alabama and to serve this year as chairman of the board of the Birmingham Business Alliance. Just have a few brief things I want to say here. I know you're all about ready to move on out of here, but as you may have read recently, the Birmingham Coca-Cola was chosen by Coke to introduce a commemorative edition bottle. Y'all may have seen it. We had a bit of article in one of the other newspapers and recently, and it's a 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Movement demonstrations. It memorializes and honors those. I want to thank Claude Nielsen and Walker Jones of Coca-Cola, who would like to give everyone today who is in attendance one of these commemorative bottles. So as you leave, please pick one up as you go. And I want to thank Coca-Cola United in our table here. I want Walter Body, who's back there, who will show you where to go and how to get this. I take it, Walter. And thank you all. They're right back there in the back. So, finally, I want to take a minute just to again thank who made this day possible, and that is our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Mercedes-Benz. Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Felicia, for what you've done. Our VIP reception sponsor, who is Wells Fargo. Gold sponsors, my own AT&T, Coca-Cola Energen, Protective, and Sam's Club. Our silver sponsors, who are Alacare Home Health, Hospice, Jimmy Hill Mission, and the University of Alabama in Birmingham. Hello, Tony, there's our friends from Jimmy Hill Mission and UAB. And our media sponsor here with one and only Jesse Lewis. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Good day.